Jai-Ho's calm finally broke. His carefully neutral expression gave way to controlled anger. They see us as primitives to exploit. Their offer is essentially colonial subjugation, dressed up as protection. He transmitted the imperial terms, watching as the leaders reviewed them. Faces darkened with concern. "This is worse than our worst projections," said Administrator Chen from the Asian Alliance. President Okafor of the African Union leaned forward. "What's your assessment of their military capabilities, Captain?" "Their technology is centuries beyond ours," Jai-Ho admitted. "Their ship's energy signature alone indicates power generation we can barely comprehend. If they decide to take what they want by force, our current defenses would be meaningless." Silence fell over the connection as this reality sank in. "Then we have no choice but to accept their terms," suggested Premier Volkov. Jai-Ho shook his head. "With respect, that would be a mistake. The Empire expects us to either accept immediately out of fear or haggle for slightly better terms. Either way, they've categorized us as a resource to exploit, not a civilization to respect." "What alternative do you suggest?" General Monroe asked. "We need time. Time to understand their technology, their weaknesses. They clearly don't expect much from us. That's an advantage. Their arrogance means they won't see us as a threat." The meeting continued for hours as Earth's leaders debated their limited options. Eventually, they reached a consensus. Earth would delay, gather information, and secretly begin preparing for a future where humanity could negotiate from strength. The days following the meeting were tense. Scientists pored over scans of the Imperial vessel. Intelligence agencies consolidated all information about the Empire, which wasn't much. They had revealed little about themselves beyond their considerable territory and technological capabilities. 1 week after first contact, Jai-Ho received a message from Dr. Hae-Yun Park, Earth's leading physicist working on the Imperial data. "Captain, I need to speak with you urgently," she said. "There's something in the propulsion system. It's not as advanced as it first appeared." Jai-Ho met with her in a secure laboratory. Dr. Park pointed to energy readings from the Imperial ship. "Look here. Their FTL system relies on principles similar to our theoretical models. They're just implementing it with better materials and more energy. The gap isn't as wide as we thought." "Are you saying we could catch up?" Jai-Ho asked. "Not immediately," she cautioned. "But the difference is decades, not centuries. And there's more. Their communication technology has vulnerabilities our quantum systems might exploit." For the first time since the meeting, Jai-Ho felt a spark of hope. At the 2-week mark, United Earth Command made their decision. When Jai-Ho next met with Ambassador Varick, he presented a counter-proposal, offering limited resources and requesting technology exchanges, particularly in medicine and agriculture. Varick's reaction was telling. The alien seemed genuinely surprised that humans would negotiate rather than accept the Empire's terms outright. "Your species is interesting," Varick said. "Most developing worlds recognize the value of imperial protection immediately. Earth values its independence," Jai-Ho replied simply. "We wish to join the galactic community as contributors, not merely as resource providers." The meeting ended without resolution, but Jai-Ho had confirmed what Earth's leaders suspected. The Empire was used to immediate compliance. Their strategy for dealing with new species relied on intimidation and a display of technological superiority, not actual warfare. That night, Earth's Defense Council met in an underground facility in Geneva. Representatives from every major military power gathered to hear General Monroe's unprecedented proposal. "We are forming the United Earth Defense Force, effective immediately," she announced. "All space-capable military units will be consolidated under a single command structure. Our mission is simple: develop the capability to defend Earth against imperial aggression within 5 years." Jai-Ho, invited as an observer, watched as former rivals agreed to share military secrets and technologies. The imperial threat had accomplished what centuries of human diplomacy could not: genuine global unity. When Jai-Ho returned to his quarters that night, He received a personal message from President Okafor. Captain Kim, your handling of the Imperial delegation has bought us precious time. We don't know if it will be enough, but thanks to you, humanity has a fighting chance. Continue to engage them diplomatically while we prepare. History may remember this as humanity's darkest hour, or the beginning of our greatest chapter. Jaiho stared out his window at the stars, wondering which of them might be part of the vast empire. For the first time, he felt not just fear, but determination. The empire had made a critical error. They had underestimated humanity's resilience and creativity. We'll show them otherwise, he whispered to himself, echoing his earlier words. We'll show them exactly what humans are capable of. Dr. Hae-Yoon Park rubbed her tired eyes as the holographic engine schematics hovered above her workspace. The blue light cast strange shadows across her lab at the United Earth Research Facility. Empty coffee cups lined her desk, evidence of her third straight night without proper sleep. You should rest, said her colleague Taiwan Lee from the doorway. He carried 2 fresh cups of coffee despite his words. Hae-Yoon accepted one gratefully. I'm close to a breakthrough. I can feel it. Taiwan set his coffee down and examined the complex hologram spinning slowly in the air. The schematic showed what they had named the quantum compression drive, their attempt to reverse engineer the imperial FTL technology from the limited scans taken during first contact. The power requirements are still impossible, he said, pointing to the numbers flashing red in the corner of the display. We'd need a small sun to power this thing. Hae-Yoon smiled tiredly. That's only if we follow their approach. Look here. She expanded a section of the hologram with a gesture. The Imperials use brute force to punch through space-time, but what if we fold it instead? She manipulated the hologram, adjusting variables in the quantum matrix that determined how the engine would interact with the fabric of space. The simulated power requirements dropped significantly. There, she muttered, fine-tuning the calculations. The compression ratio should be stable now. The simulation began to run, showing a theoretical spacecraft moving through folded space. The numbers changed from red to yellow. Still challenging, but no longer impossible. Taiwan frowned at the simulation. The Imperials say this is impossible. Their scientific attaché specifically told the Exchange Committee that smaller species lack the understanding to improve upon Imperial technology. Hae-Yoon smiled. Then they'll be surprised when it works. If it works, Taiwan corrected. The theory looks promising, but we need to test it. He hesitated, and hoped the Imperials don't notice what we're doing. The Empire had established a permanent diplomatic presence on Earth. Their massive embassy ship orbited alongside the International Space Station, monitoring all Earth communications and activities under the guise of cultural exchange. Everyone knew they were watching for signs of resistance or technological advancement. They're looking for weapons, Hae-Yoon said. This is just an engine. A faster, more efficient engine that doesn't follow their design principles. Taiwan nodded slowly. I'll talk to General Monroe about securing resources for a prototype. 2 weeks later, Hae-Yoon stood before the United Earth Defense Council in their underground facility. The world's top military and scientific leaders watched as she explained her theory with simplified diagrams. Traditional FTL engines, including those used by the Empire, require enormous energy to punch through space-time, she explained. But our approach folds space instead, requiring significantly less power while potentially achieving greater speeds. General Monroe leaned forward. And you're certain this will work? The simulations are promising, Hae-Yoon replied honestly. But we need to build a working prototype to prove the concept. The resources required would be substantial, noted Administrator Zhao, and impossible to hide from Imperial observers. Not if we disguise it as something else, suggested Admiral Kimura. The Empire has allowed us to continue our primitive space exploration. We could build the prototype as part of a deep space research vessel. President Okafor nodded thoughtfully. How long would you need, Dr. Park? With full resources and a dedicated team. 6 months for a working prototype. The room fell silent as the leaders considered the risk. If the Empire discovered their true intentions, it could provoke the very conflict they were trying to prepare for. "We have no choice," President Okafor finally said. "Dr. Park, you have your authorization. This project is now top priority." Codename Folded Wing. The next months passed in a blur of activity. Heyoon barely saw daylight, working from her lab to the testing facility and back. Her team grew to 50 of Earth's brightest minds, all working under the cover story of developing a new research vessel. Imperial observers occasionally requested tours of the facility. During these visits, the sensitive equipment was hidden behind false walls, and the team worked on decoy projects that looked impressive but revealed nothing of their true work. "They're getting suspicious," Ta-Won warned after one such visit. "The scientific attaché asked too many questions about our power systems." Heyoon nodded. "We need to accelerate the timeline. Is the test vessel ready?" "The Perseus is ready for engine installation. We can begin final calibrations tomorrow." The Perseus was small by Starship standards, just large enough for a crew of 5, with the experimental drive taking up most of the interior space. It looked unimpressive from the outside, deliberately designed to appear as a standard research vessel. The night before the first test, Heyoon couldn't sleep. She returned to the lab to make one final check of the calculations. As she worked, Captain Jeho Kim, now Earth's chief liaison with the Imperial Embassy, entered quietly. "Dr. Park," he greeted her. "I thought I might find you here." "Captain," she nodded, minimizing her displays out of habit. "No need for that," he said with a small smile. "I have clearance for Folded Wing." He looked at the remaining displays. "Tomorrow is the big day." "If it works," she said, echoing Ta-Won's earlier caution. "It will work," Jeho said with unexpected certainty. "The Empire has made a critical miscalculation about humans. They see us as primitive because we haven't developed certain technologies, but they fail to understand our capacity to innovate." He paused. "Their civilization is old, Dr. Park, old and set in its ways. They haven't needed to truly innovate in centuries." Heyoon considered this. That would explain why their representative dismissed my questions about alternative approaches to FTL travel. "Exactly. Use that advantage tomorrow." The next day, the Perseus launched from Earth's lunar base, ostensibly on a mission to study Jupiter's moons. The Imperial Embassy sent a routine courier vessel to escort the human ship, a thinly veiled excuse to monitor their activities. In the Perseus control room, Heyoon sat at the engine controls while Commander Soo-Jin Park, formerly Jeho's second-in-command, took the captain's chair. "Imperial vessel is maintaining distance at 2,000 kilometers, reported the sensor officer. "They're scanning us, but nothing beyond standard protocols." "Good," Soo-Jin nodded. "Dr. Park, are we ready for the test?" Heyoon checked her readings one last time. "Power systems nominal. Quantum matrix stable. We're ready." "Begin test sequence," ordered Soo-Jin. Heyoon activated the drive. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Then subtle vibrations ran through the ship as the quantum fields began to interact with space-time. "Energy consumption at predicted levels," reported Ta-Won from his station. "Field integrity holding at 98%. "Prepare for fold," Heyoon said, her fingers dancing across the controls. 3, 2, 1. She pressed the final sequence. For a brief moment, the stars outside the viewport appeared to stretch, then snapped back into place. A slight feeling of disorientation passed through the crew. "Status," demanded Soo-Jin. The navigation officer stared at his display in disbelief. "We've traveled 3 astronomical units in under 10 seconds. He looked up, eyes wide. It worked. Heyoon checked her own readings, hardly daring to believe it. The fold was stable. Power consumption was actually lower than predicted. "And the Imperial escort?" asked Soo-Jin. "Left far behind," confirmed the sensor officer with a grin. "They're still at Jupiter's orbit. We're already past Saturn." Su Jin allowed herself a small smile. Let's complete the test series before they catch up. Over the next hour, the Perseus performed a series of jumps, each more ambitious than the last. The final test took them to the edge of the solar system and back in less than 15 minutes, a journey that would have taken conventional ships months. When they finally allowed the Imperial escort to catch up, the alien vessel approached rapidly, its communication systems broadcasting on all frequencies. Human vessel Perseus, came the Imperial communication. Explain your propulsion anomaly immediately. Su Jin nodded to her communications officer. This is Commander Park of the Perseus. We experienced a temporary malfunction in our experimental drive system. The issue has been resolved, and we are resuming our scheduled research mission. There was a long pause before the Imperial vessel responded. Your malfunction will be reported to Imperial Command for analysis. Maintain your current position for inspection. 3 months later, the first full-sized human ship equipped with Park's quantum compression drive launched from Earth's orbital shipyard. The Odyssey was officially designated as Earth's first deep space exploration vessel, but its true purpose was to test the limits of the new drive in interstellar space. On its maiden voyage, the Odyssey encountered an Imperial courier vessel on its regular route between star systems. Following its programmed mission parameters, the human ship accelerated to full speed, outpacing the Imperial courier by a factor of 3 and leaving behind stunned alien observers who scrambled to explain the anomaly. In her lab on Earth, He-Yun received the encrypted transmission from the Odyssey and smiled. Now they know, she whispered to herself. Taiwan looked up from his workstation. Know what? That the impossible is only impossible until someone does it. Admiral Sunwoo Lee stood before the massive holographic map that dominated the command center of Outpost Horizon. The room was dimly lit, making the glowing star systems stand out in sharp relief. He clasped his hands behind his back, studying the display with careful attention. Dozens of systems glowed blue across the map, new human colonies established in regions the Empire had deemed worthless. Red markers indicated known Imperial territories and patrol routes. The contrast between the densely populated Imperial core and the scattered human settlements along the galactic rim was striking. Status report, Sunwoo ordered, his voice calm but authoritative. Lieutenant Ji Nin Kang stepped forward, tablet in hand. The Dagle system is now fully operational, she reported. The mineral deposits they overlooked are yielding 3 times projected output. Sunwoo nodded, his expression betraying nothing of the satisfaction he felt. And the defense grid? Complete. 4th Fleet is stationed at the outer marker, ready to respond to any Imperial probes. The ignored corners of the galaxy were becoming humanity's greatest asset. The Empire had never bothered to thoroughly survey these worthless systems, missing resources that human scientists quickly learned to utilize. Any Imperial activity near our territories? Sunwoo asked. None in the past week, Jaemin replied. Their patrol patterns remain predictable. They seem to consider this sector a low priority. Good. Let's keep it that way. 5 years had passed since first contact. The initial fear and desperate scramble for technological parity had given way to a careful strategy of expansion and resource accumulation. After Dr. Park's breakthrough with the quantum compression drive, humanity had gained a crucial advantage: the ability to travel quickly and quietly through space, establishing colonies and systems the Empire had dismissed as worthless. Sunwoo turned as the command center doors slid open. Captain Hannah Yun entered, her uniform bearing the patches of the scout vessel Pathfinder. Admiral, she said with a salute, we've returned from the Mira cluster. Report, Sunwoo said, gesturing her toward the holographic display. Hannah approached the map and entered commands into the console. New star systems appeared, glowing yellow to indicate potential colonization targets. We found 3 more systems with habitable planets, she explained. The Empire has minimal presence in the region, just automated monitoring stations that are easy to avoid. She highlighted one system in particular. This one is especially promising. We've designated it Novus. It has 2 planets in the habitable zone, abundant mineral resources, and unusual radiation patterns that seem to confuse imperial sensors. Sun Wu studied the system with interest. Natural sensor interference. No, sir. The science team believes it's artificial, remnants of technology from a civilization that predates the Empire. This caught Sun Wu's full attention. Ancient technology. Is it still functional? Partially. We recovered some artifacts that Dr. Park's team is analyzing now. Preliminary findings suggest it's related to communication across vast distances, possibly even interdimensional. Sun Wu's mind raced with the strategic implications. If humans could salvage and understand this technology before the Empire realized its value, it could provide another crucial advantage. Mark Novus for immediate colonization, he ordered. Priority level 1. I want our best science teams there within the month. Yes, sir, Jamin acknowledged, making notes on her tablet. The meeting continued as they discussed resource allocation, defense strategies, and the ongoing diplomatic dance with the Empire. Throughout it all, Sun Wu maintained his composed exterior, though internally he felt the weight of responsibility for humanity's future. When the briefing concluded, Sun Wu retreated to his private office. The room was sparse: a desk, a few chairs, and a window looking out at the stars. On his desk sat a small hologram of his family back on Earth. A chime announced a visitor. Enter, Sun Wu called. Dr. Min Ji-song, head of xenobiology, stepped inside. Her usually neat appearance was disheveled, suggesting she had been working without rest. Admiral, I need to show you something, she said without preamble. It couldn't wait. She placed a small container on his desk and opened it carefully. Inside was what appeared to be a smooth metallic sphere about the size of a marble. We found this on Dagle IV, she explained. It's biological, not technological. Sun Wu frowned. Biological? It looks like metal. That's what makes it remarkable. It's a seed, but unlike anything in imperial biological databases, we believe it belongs to a species that evolved to incorporate metallic compounds into its cellular structure. And why is this important enough to bring directly to me? Sun Wu asked. Min Ji's eyes lit up with excitement, because it can grow into structures as hard as steel but completely organic, self-repairing, adaptive, and capable of surviving in vacuum. Imagine hulls that heal themselves, Admiral, or space stations that grow rather than requiring construction. Sun Wu stared at the tiny sphere with new appreciation. The Empire knows nothing of this. Their surveys of Dagle IV were cursory at best. They classified it as mineral poor, biologically unremarkable. They never even landed on the surface. This was the pattern they had discovered repeatedly. The Empire, vast and ancient, had grown complacent. Their surveys were often superficial, focused only on resources they already valued. They missed what they weren't looking for. Begin cultivation immediately, Sun Wu ordered, but keep this classified at the highest level. After Min Ji left, Sun Wu returned to the command center's holographic map. He expanded the view to show the full galaxy, the bright, densely populated imperial core surrounded by the vast, sparsely settled rim where humanity was quietly taking root. Show me all imperial patrol routes, he commanded. The map updated, displaying red lines that indicated regular imperial military movements. They formed a web that was dense near the core, but grew increasingly sparse toward the rim. Now overlay our colony network and supply routes. Blue lines appeared, connecting the human settlements in patterns that deliberately avoided imperial patrols. The strategy was clear. Humanity was expanding into the gaps, claiming the spaces the Empire had deemed unworthy of attention. Sir, Ji Min said, approaching with a concerned expression, we've detected an Imperial science vessel changing course toward the Novus system. Sun Wu frowned. Have they detected our interest in the system? Unknown. Their course change occurred 12 hours after Pathfinder departed the area. It could be coincidence, Sun Wu mused, or they might have detected something we missed. He considered for a moment. Dispatched the Sentinel to intercept. Have them maintain distance but observe the Imperial vessel's activities. Yes, sir. 3 days later, Sun Wu reviewed the Sentinel's report with mounting concern. The Imperial science vessel had conducted a thorough survey of Novus, focusing particularly on the planets with the ancient technological remnants. They know, he said to his assembled staff. Or at least, they suspect. What do we do? Asked Commander Da-hyun Park, his defense strategist. Abandon the Novus colonization plan. Sun Wu shook his head. No, we accelerated. He turned to the holographic display. The Empire moves slowly. Their bureaucracy requires multiple surveys, reports, and authorizations before any significant action. We need to establish ourselves there before they decide the system is worth claiming. He issued new orders, redirecting ships and resources to expedite the Novus colony. Then he addressed the more pressing concern. Now, after 97 days of negotiations, the final document lay on the table before them. The Treaty of Harmony, as it would be known to history, represented something unprecedented in Imperial experience. A genuine partnership with a species they had initially dismissed as primitive. President Chen concluded her remarks and invited the Prime Counselor to speak. The Imperial official rose, towering over the humans present. For 12,000 years, the Empire has brought order and stability to the galaxy. The translator conveyed. In that time, many species have joined our civilization, accepting the guidance of those with greater experience and wisdom. Jai-Ho tensed slightly at these words, wondering if the old condescension was returning. But then the Prime Counselor continued. Humanity has chosen a different path. Rather than accepting the established order, you have challenged us to reconsider assumptions that have guided Imperial policy for millennia. Your species has demonstrated capabilities that our analysts failed to anticipate and resourcefulness that our strategists could not counter. The Imperial officials' mandibles moved in what cultural experts had identified as a gesture of grudging admiration. The Empire acknowledges that the traditional model of incorporation is not suitable for all species. The Treaty of Harmony establishes a new framework, one of alliance rather than assimilation, of cooperation rather than control. When the formal speeches concluded, both delegations approached the treaty document. President Chen signed first, followed by the Prime Counselor, whose signature was created by pressing a specialized appendage into a receptive section of the document. As the two leaders completed the ceremony, Jai-Ho stepped forward. As the official who had led the human diplomatic effort from first contact through the final negotiations, he had been given the honor of formally receiving the Imperial delegation's ratification. The human alliance welcomes this new era of cooperation, Jai-Ho stated formally as the treaty was finalized, using the newly established term for Earth and its colonies. The Prime Counselor, still visibly shaken by humanity's display of power weeks earlier, nodded stiffly. The Empire acknowledges humanity's place among the great civilizations. With those words, 10 years of uncertainty and tension transformed into a new relationship. The treaty would open Imperial markets to human goods, recognize all existing human colonies as sovereign territory, and establish protocols for resolving future disputes without military action. Most importantly, it explicitly recognized humans as equals rather than subjects, a concession the Empire had never before granted to a young species. Following the signing, a reception allowed for less formal interaction between the delegations. Jai-Ho found himself approached by Commander Vrelex, whose defeat at Proxima had played a crucial role in changing Imperial perceptions. Captain Kim, the Imperial officer, greeted him. Or should I say Ambassador Kim now? Captain is still correct, Jai-Ho replied. I remain a servant of Earth's defense forces, though my duties have changed somewhat. Vrelex's mandibles clicked in what Jai-Ho now recognized as thoughtful consideration. I have studied your species extensively since our encounter at Proxima. There is something I still do not understand. What's that, Commander? You could have destroyed our forces there, yet you chose to disable and release them. You could have attacked our core worlds when you revealed your true fleet, yet you offered negotiation instead. Why show restraint when victory was possible? Jai-Ho considered how to explain concepts that might be foreign to imperial military doctrine. Destruction is easy, Commander. Building something lasting is harder. We didn't want to defeat the Empire. We wanted to change our relationship with it. An unusual military objective, Vrelex noted. Perhaps that's why your analysts struggled to predict our actions, Jai-Ho suggested. They were looking for conventional military goals when our true objective was diplomatic. The Imperial commander made a gesture Jai-Ho didn't recognize. I have been assigned to the new Joint Military Exchange Program. Perhaps I will come to understand human thinking better through closer observation. We look forward to working with you, Jai-Ho replied diplomatically. As the reception continued, Jai-Ho found a moment to step away, moving to one of the Harmony's large viewports. Earth rotated slowly below, blue and green and achingly beautiful. Beyond it, the stars stretched into infinity, many of them now accessible to human ships without fear of Imperial interference. Dr. Hae-Yoon Park joined him at the viewport. Now the head of the Human Alliance's Scientific Council, she had been instrumental in developing the technologies that had earned humanity its independence. Quite a view, she said quietly. Worth all the late nights in the lab. Jai-Ho smiled. Many, many late nights. The Imperial scientists have been reviewing our research proposals, Hae-Yoon mentioned. They're particularly interested in the quantum compression drive. Apparently, they've been trying to improve their FTL systems for centuries with minimal progress. Will you share the technology with them? Hae-Yoon shrugged. Some aspects. The treaty allows for controlled technology exchange, but I'm more interested in their biotechnology. There's so much we can learn from each other now that we're not focused on military advantage. As officials from both delegations mingled, Admiral Sun Woo-Lee approached, looking satisfied but tired. The Imperial military attaché just informed me they're withdrawing forces from 3 sectors near our colonial territories. He told them quietly. A show of good faith not required by the treaty. They're being surprisingly accommodating, Jai-Ho observed. They're being practical, Sun Woo corrected. Their analysts have finally accepted that humans don't think like species they've encountered before. That makes us unpredictable, and they prefer to have unpredictable elements as allies rather than adversaries. As the reception drew to a close and the Imperial delegation prepared to depart, Jai-Ho found himself standing with President Chen as she bid farewell to the Prime Counselor. This treaty marks the beginning of a productive relationship, the Imperial official stated. The experience has been educational for the Empire. For humanity as well, President Chen replied diplomatically. We look forward to centuries of peaceful cooperation. After the Imperial delegation had departed, Jai-Ho remained behind as the other officials filed out. Alone in the now quiet conference chamber, he gazed out at the stars. Humanity had earned respect not through conquest, but by forcing recognition. The true human advantage had never been technology alone, but the creativity and adaptability the rigid empire couldn't comprehend. His communication device chimed, displaying a message from General Min-Ho Choi. Operation Phantom Armada officially concluded. All Phantom projections deactivated. The real work begins now. Jai-Ho smiled to himself. Yes, the real work was just beginning. Building a lasting peace would be more challenging than winning the Empire's respect. But as he looked out at the stars, he felt confident that humanity was ready for that challenge. As Captain Ji-Ho Kim left the conference chamber, he reflected that the Empire had made one critical error from the beginning. They had classified humans according to their technology level, assuming that determined their potential. They had failed to understand that humans had faced existential challenges throughout their history and had always found ways to survive against overwhelming odds. The Galactic Empire had encountered countless species in its long history, but none quite like humans. And now, They would learn what it meant to have humans as allies rather than subjects. For better or worse, we need to understand what they know and how they know it, he said. Commander Park, prepare a team for a covert operation. I want them to access the Imperial science vessel's data before it returns to Imperial space. The operation was high-risk but successful. A small team using stealth technology developed from Dr. Park's quantum research managed to infiltrate the Imperial vessel while it was in orbit around the outermost planet of the Novus system. They copied its survey data and planted false information to mislead the Empire about the system's true value. When the team returned with the stolen data, Sun Wu reviewed it personally. The Imperial scientists had indeed detected energy signatures from the ancient technology, but they had misclassified it as natural phenomena. More concerning, they had noted unusual quantum fluctuations consistent with human drive signatures. "They're starting to recognize our drive energy patterns," Sun Wu told his staff. "Dr. Park needs to know about this immediately." The next week brought another development. The Dagal colony reported an Imperial diplomatic vessel requesting permission to visit. The request was politely worded but left little room for refusal. Sun Wu traveled to Dagal personally to meet with the Imperial representatives. The meeting took place in the colony's administration building, a simple structure that deliberately understated humanity's progress. Ambassador Kellick, a high-ranking Imperial diplomat, studied Sun Wu with compound eyes that gleamed with intelligence. Admiral Li, the translator, rendered the Imperial speech. "The Empire is curious about humanity's sudden interest in these remote systems." Sun Wu offered the practiced response. "Earth is becoming crowded. We seek new homes for our growing population, in systems with minimal resources." Kellick's mandibles clicked in what humans had learned was skepticism, systems the Empire surveyed and found lacking. "Perhaps our needs differ from the Empire's," Sun Wu suggested smoothly. "What seems worthless to one species may be valuable to another." The meeting continued with careful exchanges. Sun Wu revealed nothing of strategic importance while gathering what information he could about Imperial interests and concerns. After the Imperial delegation departed, Sun Wu stood on the colony's observation deck, looking out at the settlement that had grown from nothing in just 3 years. Buildings spread across the valley, inhabited by 30,000 humans. Mining facilities operated in the distance, extracting minerals the Empire had overlooked. Lieutenant Ji Min joined him, offering a data tablet. "The Novus colony ships have arrived safely. Initial construction has begun." Sun Wu nodded. "Good. And the special cargo?" "The science team is already setting up their equipment near the ancient ruins. They estimate it will take 6 months to understand the technology." "Tell them they have 3 months," Sun Wu said, his gaze still on the colony spread before him. "The Empire is waking up to our activities. Our window of opportunity is closing." As he watched the lights of the colony twinkle in the gathering dusk, Sun Wu allowed himself a moment of pride. Humanity had come far from the fear and desperate negotiation of first contact. They were no longer merely reacting to Imperial demands. They were building something the Empire never expected, a network of thriving colonies in the places deemed worthless, gathering resources and technologies overlooked by ancient eyes too set in their ways to see new possibilities. The ignored corners of the galaxy had become humanity's greatest asset, and the Empire still didn't understand just how dangerous that made them. Commander Yunji Kang stood on the bridge of the UES Defender, her hands clasped behind her back as she stared at the main view screen. The ship's lighting had been dimmed to combat status, casting her face in shadows. Outside the reinforced windows of the bridge, Proxima colony spread across the planet's surface, home to over 50,000 human settlers. "Contact at the edge of our sensor range," announced Lieutenant Min Ho Ryu from the tactical station. 3 Imperial vessels just dropped out of FTL. Yunji nodded once, her face showing no emotion. "Identification: 1 Dominion-class battlecruiser and 2 Enforcer-class escort vessels," Min Ho reported, his voice tight. "Major firepower, Commander." The bridge crew exchanged nervous glances. Imperial battlecruisers were known to carry enough weaponry to level an entire colony from orbit. The Defender and its small fleet of 6 support ships were officially classified as patrol vessels, deliberately designed to appear less advanced than they actually were. "They're taking standard approach vector," said the sensor officer. "Estimated time to weapons range, 15 minutes. Eun-ji tapped her communication panel. "All ships maintain formation Alpha. No aggressive movements." She turned to her communications officer. "Open a channel when they hail us." She didn't have to wait long. The main screen flickered, revealing the alien visage of Imperial Commander Vrelex. The insectoid face betrayed no emotion that humans could read, but his mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation they had learned to recognize. "Attention human settlement," the translation came through. "This colony has been established in violation of Imperial territorial claims. Your presence here is unauthorized." Eun-ji kept her expression neutral. "Imperial Commander, Proxima Colony was established in accordance with the Earth Imperial Non-Interference Treaty of 2087. We have documentation off." "Your documentation is irrelevant," Vrelex interrupted. "Recent surveys have discovered valuable quantum-resonant minerals in this system. The Empire is exercising its right of resource priority." Eun-ji's jaw tightened slightly. The Empire's right of resource priority was a convenient clause they had inserted into the treaty, allowing them to claim any system where strategically valuable resources were discovered, regardless of existing settlements. "We request time to consult with Earth Central Command regarding this claim," Eun-ji replied diplomatically. The Imperial Commander's compound eyes gleamed. "There is nothing to consult. They're broadcasting demands for immediate surrender," her communications officer whispered urgently. "Full evacuation within 48 hours. Anyone remaining will be considered hostile." Eun-ji nodded her understanding while maintaining eye contact with the Imperial Commander. "We will need more time to evacuate civilian populations," she said. "Many of our people have established permanent." 48 hours, Vrelex repeated. "The Empire has been patient with human expansion. That patience has limits." The screen went dark as the transmission ended. Eun-ji turned to her executive officer. "Commander Jun, what's the status of our defense network?" "All systems go," Jun replied quietly. "Pulse generators are charged and ready. Stealth satellites are in position, completely undetected by Imperial scans. And Admiral Lee's special modifications to our ships. Online but dormant. They still register as standard patrol vessels on Imperial scanners." Eun-ji nodded, her mind racing through the scenarios they had prepared for. This moment had been anticipated for years, the inevitable point when the Empire would attempt to reassert dominance over humanity. The only question had been where and when it would happen. "Send encrypted transmission to Admiral Lee," she ordered. "Operation Defiance is now active." As her officers carried out her commands, Eun-ji stared at the tactical display where the 3 Imperial warships moved steadily closer. Their arrogance was palpable, sending only 3 ships to claim a human colony. They still viewed humans as primitive, despite the evidence of technological advancement they had demonstrated. That arrogance would be their downfall. "Commander," called out Lieutenant Minho, "the battlecruiser is charging weapons systems." Eun-ji's expression didn't change. "Activate the pulse generators. All ships maintain position according to the Admiral's strategy." Throughout the Proxima system, hidden satellites came to life, generating quantum fields that were specifically calibrated to interfere with Imperial shield technology. The field was the result of years of research by Dr. Hae-Yoon Park and her team, who had studied every scrap of Imperial technology they could access. On the view screen, Eun-ji watched as the Imperial vessels moved into attack formation. The battlecruiser took point position, its massive weapons ports beginning to glow with energy. The escorts took flanking positions, creating the classic Imperial triangle formation used for planetary subjugation. "They're entering the field now," Minho reported, tension evident in his voice. The moment the Imperial ships crossed the invisible boundary, the hidden network of quantum pulse generators activated. Waves of carefully calibrated energy washed over the alien vessels. On the tactical display, Yunji watched as the energy signatures of the Imperial shields flickered and failed. "Now," Yunji ordered, her voice calm but commanding. The seemingly outdated human defensive fleet suddenly transformed. Armored panels slid away, revealing advanced weapon systems that had been concealed beneath. Engines that had appeared conventional surged with power as quantum compression technology came fully online. "All ships, execute attack pattern Omega," Yunji commanded. "Target weapons and propulsion systems only. We want those ships disabled, not destroyed." The human vessels moved with startling speed, surrounding the Imperial ships before they could recover from the shield failure. The Defender led the assault, targeting the battlecruiser's main weapon array with precision strikes from phase cannons, weapons the Empire had never encountered before. The phase cannons fired beams of accelerated particles that existed partially out of phase with normal space, allowing them to penetrate even the backup hull defenses of the Imperial vessels. The technology had been developed in secret by combining Imperial scientific principles with human innovation. "Direct hits on all targets," Minho reported, unable to keep the excitement from his voice. "The battlecruiser's main weapons are offline. Escort vessels attempting to restore shields." On the view screen, Yunji watched as the Imperial ships tried to regroup. Their movements were sluggish, confused. They had never expected such effective resistance. The escort vessels attempted to form a protective barrier around the battlecruiser, but the human ships were too quick, darting through their formation with maneuvers that would have been impossible without the quantum compression drive. "The battlecruiser is attempting to power up secondary weapons," reported Minho. "Target their power distribution nodes," Yunji ordered. "Fire phase cannons, full spread." The Defender unleashed another barrage, targeting the vulnerable points in the Imperial ship's design that had been identified through years of careful intelligence gathering. The energy beams struck with surgical precision, causing cascading power failures throughout the massive vessel. "They're attempting to transmit a distress signal," called out the communications officer. "Jam all frequencies," Yunji replied. "Nothing gets out until we're finished here." The battle continued for just under 7 minutes, though to many on the bridge, it seemed both longer and shorter than that. When it ended, all 3 Imperial vessels drifted powerless, their weapons disabled and communication systems jammed. "Status report," Yunji demanded. "All Imperial vessels have been neutralized," Minho confirmed, his voice filled with disbelief. "Minimal damage to our fleet. The Intrepid reports 2 injured crewmen from a power surge, but nothing serious." Yunji allowed herself a small nod of satisfaction. "Open a channel to the battlecruiser." When Commander Vrelex's face appeared on screen again, the aliens' mandibles were completely still, a sign of shock or disbelief in their species. "Imperial Commander," Yunji said calmly, "your vessels have been disabled, but remain intact. Your crews are unharmed. We will allow you to make repairs sufficient for FTL travel, but your weapon systems will remain offline." This is impossible," Vrelex stammered, his translator struggling to convey his shock. "Human technology can't." "As you can see, Commander, your information about human capabilities is outdated," Yunji interrupted. "You will return to Imperial space with a message. Proxima colony and all human settlements are not to be threatened again. Any further military action against human colonies will be met with similar resistance." The alien commander's compound eyes gleamed with what might have been anger or fear. "The Empire will not accept this defiance. When the Imperial fleet learns of this incident, they will learn that humans are not the primitive species you believed us to be." Yunji finished for him. "They will learn that we have been studying you while you underestimated us. Choose your next actions carefully, Commander." After the transmission ended, Yunji ordered repair teams to assist the Imperial vessels with life support and propulsion systems only. Within 12 hours, The crippled Imperial ships limped away from Proxima, their once proud battlecruiser now escorted by human vessels to the edge of the system. 3 days later, Yunji sat in her quarters reviewing the after-action reports when her communication panel chimed. Admiral Sun Wu Li's face appeared on the screen. "Commander Kang," he greeted her formally. "Congratulations on your successful defense of Proxima Colony." "Thank you, Admiral," she replied. "Though I suspect the Empire won't take this defeat lightly." Sun Wu nodded gravely. "No, they won't. Our intelligence suggests they are already recalling ships from other sectors. The Proxima incident, as they're calling it, has caused quite a stir in the Imperial Court." "Do we prepare for full-scale war then?" Yunji asked. "Not yet," Sun Wu said thoughtfully. "The Empire moves slowly, especially when confused. And right now, they are very confused. They cannot understand how a primitive species defeated their advanced warships so easily. The element of surprise won't work again," Yunji pointed out. "No, but confusion might," Sun Wu replied with a small smile. "Operation Phantom Armada is being moved up. We need to keep them off balance while we prepare our defenses across all colonies." Yunji nodded her understanding. "The Defender and her fleet are ready for whatever comes next, Admiral." After the communication ended, Yunji moved to the viewport in her quarters, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Imperial leadership was grappling with the reality that humans were not what they appeared to be. The carefully cultivated image of humanity as a developing species with limited capabilities had been shattered in a single engagement. The Proxima incident would change everything. And humanity was ready. General Minho Choi stood before the Strategic Command in the underground war room beneath Geneva. The cavernous space hummed with activity as officers from every nation on Earth monitored the status of humanity's defenses. Holographic displays showed the positions of both human and Imperial forces throughout known space. "Operation Phantom Armada is ready," Minho announced, his voice steady despite the enormity of what they were about to attempt. Admiral Sun Wu Li nodded gravely. "Walk us through the final preparations, General." Minho touched his control pad, bringing up a detailed tactical display in the center of the room. The assembled officers gathered around, their faces illuminated by the blue glow of the hologram. It showed the current disposition of human forces, 73 combat-capable vessels spread across 24 star systems. "This is reality," Minho said, then tapped another control. The display transformed, now showing over 700 vessels arranged in attack formations. "And this is what the Empire will see." The assembled officers reviewed the plan one final time. Using a combination of advanced holographic projectors, drone platforms, and innovative sensor manipulation, they would create the illusion of a human fleet 10 times larger than their actual numbers. "Each actual combat ship will serve as the core of a Phantom squadron," Minho explained, highlighting one of the formations. "The drones will maintain formation and emit energy signatures consistent with warships. The holographic projectors will create visual confirmation if any Imperial scouts get close enough for optical observation." Dr. Hae-Yoon Park, now Director of Advanced Research, spoke up from her position near the back of the room. "The key is the sensor manipulation technology. We've mapped the exact frequencies and algorithms used by Imperial detection systems. We can feed them precisely the data they expect to see." "The Imperial security algorithms are predictable," Minho added. "Their analysts will detect exactly what we want them to see." President Chen, who had succeeded Okafor as head of the United Earth government, frowned slightly. "And if they send actual ships to investigate, holograms won't hold up to physical inspection." "That's where the tactical dispersal comes in," Admiral Li answered. "We've designed the Phantom formations to never be in positions where the Empire can easily intercept them. They will always appear to be just beyond convenient reach, forcing the Empire to spread their forces thin trying to track multiple fleet movements simultaneously." Minho highlighted several regions on the display. "We've identified these areas as critical Imperial command nodes. The Phantom fleets will conduct maneuvers that suggest imminent attacks on these positions, forcing the Empire to reinforce them. Meanwhile, added Admiral Lee, our actual forces will remain hidden, ready to strike where the Empire least expects. President Chen studied the display for a long moment. The political implications are significant. This could provoke the Empire into a full-scale war before we're truly ready. With respect, Madam President, Minho said, the Proxima incident has already set us on this path. Imperial forces are already mobilizing. Our intelligence indicates they're planning punitive strikes against at least 3 human colonies. This operation gives us control of the narrative and forces them to react to us rather than the other way around. The room fell silent as the President considered this. Finally, she nodded. Very well, General. You have authorization to proceed with Operation Phantom Armada. Minho bowed slightly. Thank you, Madam President. He turned to his staff. Begin deployment. I want the first Phantom formations visible to Imperial sensors within 12 hours. As the meeting disbanded, Dr. Park approached Minho privately. There's something you should know, she said quietly, leading him to a secluded corner of the war room. We've detected unusual quantum fluctuations in the Arcturus sector. It may indicate the Empire is testing new sensor technology. Minho frowned. Will it compromise the operation? Not if we adjust our projections to account for it, He-Yun replied. But it suggests someone in the Empire is starting to think more creatively. Not all of them are bound by traditional approaches. Can you make the necessary adjustments? He-Yun nodded. Already done. But we should remain vigilant. The Empire has existed for millennia. We shouldn't assume they'll remain predictable forever. 3 days later, Minho stood in the operations center, watching as the first reports of Imperial reactions began to come in. The massive displays showed Imperial communication chatter increasing exponentially as their sensor networks detected what appeared to be a human fleet of unprecedented size appearing at the edges of their territory. They've taken the bait, reported Commander Su-Jin Park, now head of intelligence operations. Imperial command vessels are ordering defensive redeployments. They're pulling ships from their central systems to reinforce the borders. Minho allowed himself a small smile. And our actual fleet movements? Proceeding as planned. The stealth modifications are working perfectly. None of our real ships have been detected. Across Imperial space, reports began flooding in of massive human fleet movements. The Imperial Military Command, relying on their supposedly infallible detection systems, never questioned the data. Emergency sessions were called as Imperial strategists tried to understand how humans had managed to build such an enormous fleet in secret. 1 week into the operation, Minho received an unexpected visitor. Captain Je-Ho Kim, now the senior human liaison with the dwindling Imperial diplomatic corps, entered the operations center with a data crystal. General, Je-Ho said with a formal bow, I thought you should see this personally. Minho accepted the crystal and inserted it into a secure terminal. It contained intercepted communications from the Imperial High Command to their regional governors. As he read, Minho's eyes widened. They believe we have over 2,000 warships, he said with a mixture of disbelief and satisfaction. They're estimating our military production at 10 times its actual capacity. Je-Ho nodded. Their cultural tendency to rely on established data patterns works against them. Once their sensors detected what appeared to be human ships, their analysts built models to explain our supposed production capabilities. Each new phantom detection reinforces their flawed analysis. Minho shook his head, impressed by the extent of the deception's success. What about their diplomatic posture? Shifting rapidly, Je-Ho replied. The hardliners who pushed for military action after Proxima are losing influence. The more cautious factions are gaining power, arguing that the Empire needs to reassess the human threat before committing to open warfare. This was exactly what they had hoped for, buying time while humanity continued to build its actual defenses and solidify its hold on its colonial territories. 2 weeks into Operation Phantom Armada, An unexpected opportunity presented itself. Imperial forces had concentrated so heavily on defending against phantom fleets that several key resource worlds were left lightly guarded. Admiral Lee proposed a daring modification to the plan. "We can secure the Helios system while they're distracted," he argued in an emergency meeting of Strategic Command. "Their Tylium refineries there supply fuel for a third of their fleet. If we control those facilities, we gain significant leverage." Minho studied the tactical display. "The risk is that a real strike might expose the deception. Not if we maintain the phantom fleets in other sectors," Admiral Lee countered. "They'll assume the Helios strike is just one small element of our overall force." President Chen authorized the operation. 3 days later, a small but powerful human task force struck the Helios system, overwhelming the token Imperial defenses and securing the Tylium refineries intact. By the time Imperial reinforcements arrived, the facilities were under human control with defensive systems in place. The Imperial response was confusion bordering on panic. Their strategic models couldn't account for humans conducting both massive fleet deployments and precise surgical strikes simultaneously. Some Imperial analysts began to suggest that humans possess technology far beyond what had been previously assessed. 1 month into the operation, Minho called a meeting with Dr. Park and the technical team. "The Empire is adapting faster than we anticipated," he told them, showing intercepted data that indicated some Imperial sensor stations were being recalibrated. "They're starting to question some of the phantom readings." Hayud nodded. "We expected this. They're not fools, just set in their ways. We need to evolve the deception." "How?" Minho asked. "By making some of the phantoms disappear while creating new ones with slightly different signatures," she explained. "We'll simulate an evolution in our technology, making them chase new parameters and question their earlier conclusions." The adjustment worked brilliantly. Imperial analysts now faced contradictory data, unable to determine which readings were accurate and which weren't. Some began to suspect sensor malfunctions or sabotage, further complicating their response. 6 weeks into Operation Phantom Armada, Minho received word that the Imperial Emperor had called an emergency session of the High Council. Their intelligence sources couldn't determine exactly what was discussed, but in the days that followed, Imperial fleet movements changed dramatically. Rather than continuing to spread their forces thin trying to counter the phantom human fleets, they began consolidating around their core systems. "They're pulling back," Minho observed during the daily briefing, "abandoning their efforts to counter our supposed advances." "Not entirely," Sujin corrected, highlighting several Imperial battle groups. "These formations are still active, probing for our actual positions. But yes, the bulk of their fleet is retreating to defensive positions." Admiral Lee studied the display thoughtfully. "They're preparing for what they believe is an inevitable human assault on their core worlds. They've concluded they can't match our numbers, so they're falling back to their strongest defensive positions." "Which gives us exactly what we wanted," Minho said. "Space to breathe, time to build our actual capabilities, and reduced pressure on our colonies." President Chen, who had joined the briefing via secure link, spoke up. "And what happens when they realize the deception, General? Won't they strike back with even greater fury?" Minho exchanged glances with Admiral Lee before answering. "By the time they unravel the full extent of our deception, Madam President, we intend to have a real fleet that can stand against them. Not as large as our phantoms, perhaps, but large enough and advanced enough to maintain the standoff." 2 months after Operation Phantom Armada began, the first diplomatic communication from the Empire in weeks arrived. The Imperial High Council was requesting a meeting to discuss mutual security concerns and territorial boundaries. As Minho read the message in the quiet of his office, he allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The grand deception had worked better than anyone had dared hope. The phantom fleets had never fired a shot, yet they had achieved what real ships could not, forcing the mighty Galactic Empire to reconsider its approach to humanity. Outside his window, The lights of the Geneva complex glowed in the night. Somewhere up there, beyond the atmosphere, the real human fleet was growing stronger each day, preparing for the moment when phantoms would give way to reality. But for now, the shadows were humanity's greatest weapon. The imperial capital world of Nexus Prime gleamed like a jewel in space, its surface a tapestry of sprawling cities that housed billions of beings from across the empire. Orbital defense platforms formed a protective web around the planet, their weapon systems constantly scanning for threats. The Imperial Home Fleet, 200 of the most powerful warships ever constructed, maintained a vigilant patrol pattern throughout the system. For 10,000 years, no enemy force had dared approach this heart of galactic power. The defenses were considered impenetrable, the military might unassailable, which was why the sudden appearance of hundreds of human vessels in near orbit sent shockwaves through the Imperial command structure. One moment, the space around Nexus Prime contained only Imperial ships. The next, human warships materialized throughout the orbital defense network, having bypassed every early warning system and sensor grid without triggering a single alarm. In the Imperial Palace's central command center, alarms blared as officers scrambled to respond to the impossible breach. How did they penetrate our defenses? Demanded Grand Admiral Zelvax, his exoskeletal frame trembling with rage. Where is the home fleet? Still in their patrol patterns, Admiral, reported a sensor officer, her voice shaking. They didn't detect the human arrival either. Impossible. Deploy all defense platforms. Launch all fighters. I want those human ships destroyed. But before the order could be carried out, communication systems throughout the capital reported an incoming transmission, broadcasting simultaneously on all Imperial frequencies. Aboard the UES Vindication, Admiral Do-hyun Park stood calmly on the bridge of humanity's newest flagship. The massive vessel represented the pinnacle of human engineering and ingenuity, incorporating technologies reverse-engineered from Imperial designs, but improved upon in ways the Empire had never considered. The Vindication had taken position directly above the Imperial Palace, its weapon systems powered but not yet targeting any Imperial assets. Unlike the Phantom ships used to deceive Imperial intelligence over the past months, these vessels were very real, and revealed only a fraction of humanity's true capabilities. Status report, Do-hyun asked, his voice steady despite the historic magnitude of the moment. All ships in position, Admiral, reported Commander Jae-hwa-song, his executive officer. Imperial defenses are active but confused. They're having trouble getting targeting locks on our vessels. Do-hyun nodded. The quantum phase technology that allowed their ships to partially exist in a different dimension was working as designed. Imperial weapons would find it nearly impossible to hit targets that weren't fully present in normal space. Any aggressive moves from their fleet? None yet, sir. They appear to be awaiting orders. Good. Let's not give them time to organize a response. Do-hyun straightened his uniform. Open a direct channel to the Emperor. Channel open. Sir. Broadcasting directly to the Imperial Palace and throughout their command network. Do-hyun took a breath. The next few minutes would determine the future relationship between humanity and the Galactic Empire. Every word had been carefully chosen, rehearsed for weeks with diplomatic advisors and cultural experts. The main view screen flickered, then stabilized to show the Imperial throne room. Emperor Zexkeller sat rigidly on the ancient seat of power, surrounded by guards and advisors. The Emperor's iridescent carapace glinted in the chamber's light, the multiple eyes focusing intently on the human admiral. This is an act of war, the Emperor's translator rendered his chittering speech. Your species has sealed its fate. Do-hyun maintained his composure. Your Imperial Majesty, if war was our intention, we would not be having this conversation. Your palace shields are currently within our weapons range, as are your fleet command vessels. We have not fired a single shot. The Emperor's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation. State your purpose for this violation. When Du Hyun delivered the message he had practiced for weeks, his voice carried throughout the imperial capital and to listening posts across the galaxy. Your Majesty, humanity requests a renegotiation of terms. We thought a demonstration might emphasize the importance of mutual respect. There was a long pause as the Emperor conferred with his advisors, their chittering too quiet for the translator to pick up. Finally, the alien ruler turned back to the screen. You risk annihilation to request talks. The translator couldn't fully convey the mixture of disbelief and outrage in the Emperor's voice. We risk showing you the truth, Du Hyun replied calmly. The Empire has underestimated humanity from our first contact. You classified us as primitive, dismissed our potential, and treated our worlds as resources to be exploited rather than territories to be respected. Do Hyun gestured, and the transmission changed to show the human fleet surrounding Nexus Prime. What you see here is not an invasion force. It is a demonstration of capabilities we have developed while your analysts were busy tracking phantom fleets. Grand Admiral Zelvax pushed into view beside the Emperor. The fleet movements we detected were largely illusions, Du Hyun confirmed, created to occupy your attention while we built our actual defenses and studied your technologies. The ships you see now are real, but they represent only a portion of our capabilities. The Imperial Command Center erupted in hissing and clicking as the implications became clear. The Emperor raised a limb, silencing the chaos. A clever deception, the Emperor acknowledged. But you have revealed yourselves now. The Empire's full might will descend upon your worlds for this insult. Do Hyun's expression remained unchanged. Before you make that decision, Your Majesty, there is something else you should see. He nodded to Commander Song, who entered a command sequence. Across the Imperial capital world, civilians and military personnel alike looked up at the sky in astonishment as it appeared to ripple and distort. Massive structures began to phase into visibility in high orbit, structures that dwarfed even the largest Imperial battleships. These are automated defense platforms we've positioned throughout Imperial space over the past year, Du Hyun explained. They were present but out of phase with normal space, invisible to your sensors. Similar platforms now orbit every major Imperial world. The Emperor's compound eyes narrowed. You threaten our civilian populations. On the contrary, Du Hyun said firmly. They have defensive capabilities only, designed to prevent Imperial warships from bombarding human worlds or our allies. We have no interest in harming Imperial citizens. Our quarrel is not with your people, but with policies that treat newly discovered species as resources rather than equals. After another long conference with his advisors, the Emperor's posture changed subtly, the first sign of uncertainty any human had ever witnessed from the Imperial ruler. You wish to negotiate. What terms do you propose? Recognition of all human colonies as sovereign territory. Fair trade agreements based on mutual benefit, not exploitation. And alliance rather than subjugation. Ambitious demands from a species that has existed for a mere blink in the Empire's history, the Emperor noted. Age does not always equate to wisdom, Your Majesty, Du Hyun replied. Sometimes it brings complacency and blindness to new possibilities. To everyone's surprise, the Emperor made a gesture that the cultural experts aboard the Vindication identified as indicating amusement. You have certainly demonstrated possibilities that our analysts failed to anticipate. The Emperor rose from the throne. I will convene the Imperial Council to consider your proposal. In the meantime, I expect your vessels to withdraw to a respectful distance. Do Hyun bowed slightly. Once our diplomatic vessel has been granted permission to land and our representatives are received with appropriate protocols, the fleet will withdraw to the outer system. The defense platforms will remain as a guarantee of our security. Agreed, the Emperor said after a moment's consideration. When the transmission ended, the bridge of the Vindication remained silent for several heartbeats. Then Commander Song let out a long breath. They actually agreed to talks. It worked. Do Hyun nodded, finally allowing himself a small smile. Phase 1 worked. Now comes the hard part. Actual diplomacy. Within hours, a diplomatic delegation led by Ambassador Jae-ho Kim, the same officer who had endured imperial condescension during humanity's first contact, descended to the surface of Nexus Prime. It marked the first time in over a millennium that representatives of a non-imperial power had been received in the palace with full diplomatic honors. As the human fleet repositioned to the outer system as promised, Admiral Do-hyun Park stood at the viewport of his quarters, watching the gleaming imperial capital recede in the distance. A message chime interrupted his thoughts. "Admiral," came the voice of General Min-ho Choi from Earth. "Congratulations on the success of Operation Revelation. The President sends her personal thanks." "Thank you, General. Though I suspect the real work is just beginning." "True enough. The latest intelligence suggests significant division within the imperial hierarchy. Some factions are calling for immediate military action despite the demonstration, while others are advocating for genuine negotiation." Do-hyun frowned. "If the hardliners prevail, then we proceed to contingency plans," Min-ho finished. "But our analysts believe the Emperor recognizes the new reality. The very fact that humans could penetrate the defenses of Nexus Prime has shattered certain fundamental assumptions about imperial superiority." When the communication ended, Do-hyun returned to the viewport. In the 8 years since first contact, humanity had transformed from a species facing potential subjugation to one that had earned, if not yet respect, then at least caution from the ancient empire. It had been a desperate gamble, this unveiling of their true capabilities at the heart of imperial power. If the empire had called their bluff, war would have been inevitable. But humans had studied their adversary well, understanding that the imperial culture valued strength and decisive action. Appearing at their capital, bypassing their legendary defenses, and then offering peace rather than attacking, it was a move the empire's strategic models could never have predicted. It violated their understanding of how lesser species should behave. And that, Do-hyun reflected, had always been humanity's greatest advantage: the capacity to surprise, to think beyond established patterns, to do what millennia of imperial experience said was impossible. As the Vindication and its fleet took up their new positions, Do-hyun allowed himself to hope that today marked not just a successful military operation, but the beginning of a new chapter in galactic history, one where humans would be partners rather than subjects in the greater community of intelligent life. The diplomatic vessel Harmony orbited Earth at precisely the midpoint between the planet and the massive imperial flagship. This neutral position had been carefully negotiated, a symbol of the new relationship between humanity and the galactic empire. The Harmony was smaller than the imperial vessel, but gleamed with elegant efficiency, its design showcasing human aesthetics rather than trying to imitate imperial architecture. Inside the ship's grand conference chamber, representatives from both civilizations gathered for the treaty signing that would formalize 3 months of intense negotiations. The room had been designed specifically for this historic moment, with environmental controls that accommodated both human and imperial biology and furnishings that respected the cultural preferences of both species. Captain Jae-ho Kim stood near the ceremonial table, watching as the final preparations were completed. 10 years had passed since he had endured the Empire's condescension during first contact, when they had dismissed humanity as primitives barely worth diplomatic consideration. The memory of that humiliation remained clear, making this moment all the more significant. "Are you ready, Captain?" asked Yoon-ji Kang, now Admiral Kang after her promotion following the Proxima incident. Jae-ho nodded. "I've been ready for this since they first looked down their mandibles at us." Yoon-ji smiled slightly. "Try not to look too satisfied. The cultural attaché says imperial representatives consider obvious displays of emotion to be vulgar." "I'll maintain appropriate diplomatic composure," Jae-ho promised. "But between us, this feels good." The chamber doors slid open, and the imperial delegation entered. Leading them was Prime Counselor Vex Kaltar, the second most powerful figure in the empire after the emperor himself. The tall insectoid moved with the deliberate grace of his species, compound eyes taking in every detail of the human vessel. Behind Vex Kaltar came a procession of imperial officials, scientists, and military officers, including Jiho, noted with interest, Commander Vralex, who had led the failed attack on Proxima colony. The commander's posture seemed less rigid than the others, suggesting he had developed a more nuanced view of humans since his defeat. President Chen of the United Earth Government stood to greet the imperial delegation. Prime Counselor, welcome aboard the Harmony. We are honored by your presence. The translator rendered the Prime Counselor's clicking response. The honor is mutual, President Chen. The Empire approaches this historic occasion with appropriate solemnity. As the delegations took their positions around the table, Jiho studied the imperial representatives carefully. Their body language was more reserved than during previous meetings, the subtle arrogance replaced with something closer to cautious respect. The demonstration at Nexus Prime had changed something fundamental in how they perceived humans. President Chen opened the proceedings with a brief address, speaking of shared futures and mutual prosperity. As she spoke, Jiho reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. After Admiral Park's bold demonstration at the imperial capital, the initial negotiations had been tense. Hardliners in the imperial hierarchy had pushed for military action despite the risk, arguing that allowing a young species to dictate terms would encourage rebellion throughout the empire. But Emperor Zex Kalor, showing unexpected wisdom, had sided with the pragmatists. The reality was simple. The cost of subjugating humanity had become too high. Better to incorporate this unpredictable species into the galactic order than to fight a war with uncertain outcome. The negotiations that followed had been exhausting. Every word of the treaty had been debated, analyzed, and revised countless times. Territorial boundaries, trade regulations, technology exchange protocols, diplomatic procedures, all had to be defined in terms that satisfied both human independence and imperial dignity.